Hello and welcome to Geometry. I'm Mr. Lewis, and this is your first video for geometry. And in this video, we'll talk about some of the building blocks of geometry. Okay, this aligns with one CCRSM standard, and that is to know the precise definition of line segment and angle based on the undefined notions of point, line, distance along a line, and distance around a circular arc. Okay, there's more definitions we'll talk about in this video, specifically that the learning objective for this lesson, this first lesson, is that you can define and use correct notation when naming points, lines, planes, segments, collinear, what that means, segment length, ray, angle, angle measure, and congruent. Okay, I know there's a lot of terms there, and we'll define all of them in this video, but they're things we need to get started learning some geometry. Let's go. You should have picked up a geometry module book. If you didn't, then let me know and I will get you one. But you should take a lot of your notes in the module book. We do jump around a lot, and so if you want to do it in a separate notebook, that's also fine. But I will tend to use the module book as much as possible, okay, including notes for this first lesson. All right, lesson 1 is to construct an equilateral triangle. Now, this year is a little bit crazy, and we've decided not to start the year with constructions as we typically do with Engage New York. Okay, just because I think it's a lot easier to do that face-to-face and to talk about how your hand should be angled as you do the construction, and to avoid some frustration where I can't kind of critique exactly how to do those constructions. Okay. So we will be pulling out the definitions in this lesson and lesson 3 as well, and kind of get started with some of the other things and hopefully come back to constructions a little later in the year. Okay, so I'm going to actually go the page before this where there is some blank space. I like to use whatever blank space I can find in here. Okay, so down here below this index part. Okay, let's do some definitions. Okay, the first one we'll do is the definition of a point. Okay, a point is an exact location in space. Okay, if you look at the room around you, the corner of the room, okay, or the corner of a book or the tip of your pencil, some exact location in space is a point. Okay. Now in geometry, we write this as point, with a capital letter. That's very important. There's always a capital letter. Okay, always a capital letter. So point P, or if we have a triangle or some figure, we have points at all of the vertices, and then we notate it as point with a capital letter. Again, points have capital letters. Next, we have lines. A line is a one-dimensional object that has only length. Lines continue forever in both directions. Okay, here's an example of a line with 2 points on it. Again, they're points, so they have capital letters. Okay, and we label this as line DE. You pick any 2 points on that line and you name it with those 2 points. And this line down here in blue is line DE. The next word is plane. A plane is a 2-dimensional object that goes on forever in all directions. So you think about like a table or the top of a book as a plane. It's 2-dimensional, okay? But a geometric plane actually goes on forever in all directions, like a line goes on forever in both directions, okay? Now, in planes, we often have some points there, and you can name a plane using any 3 points in that plane. So, for example, this plane contains points A, B, and C, so I can call that plane ABC or plane CAB or plane BAC or any 3 points in that plane. Also, sometimes planes are given a uppercase script letter, like in this case, plane P. Let me change this to P. like plane P. Okay? Point, line, plane. These are the building blocks of geometry. Everything basically is built using points, lines, planes, or parts of these. Now, we are going to go into the module. Okay, we're skipping everything about constructions, and we'll hit some of these, well, I guess one of these definitions. Okay, now, the first definition, this one right here, says the blank between points A and B, so again, the A and the B are capital, that's important. I have point A and I have point B. Okay, the blank between points A and B is the set consisting of A, B, and all points on the line AB. So here's just think about briefly just this line, AB. Kind of missed that one, but it's okay because I can move B. Bing. Okay. All the points, A, B, and all the points on line AB between A and B. Well, that sounds a lot like what's called a segment, or a line segment. Okay? Okay, so a segment is part of a line. It starts and it stops. Okay, now you notate a segment, you call it AB, and you have a line on top with no arrows. Okay, remember back that a line goes on forever. It has arrows on both sides. Okay, a segment starts and it stops. And so you have a line on top with no arrows. Okay, for now we're going to kind of skip the definitions of center and radius that's also here. Just going to focus on the most important things for us right now in Module 1. Okay, now here on page 4, we hit the next important vocab, at least for us, and that word is collinear. Okay, now I like breaking down words so we kind of see where they come from. You may know that linear means line, okay? And co means the same. That's what the prefix co means, okay? So collinear means the same line, okay? The actual definition is 3 or more points are collinear if there is a line containing all of the points. Otherwise, the points are non-collinear. Okay. Now, one thing to point out that's not really clear in this definition is, let me say this, if there can be. Maybe it's a better way to think about it. Okay. So a good example of that would be I have a plane, right? A plane, and I have point A and I have point B. Okay. Now the question I can ask you is, are points A and B collinear? Okay. Many geometry students would say, well, no, there's no line in between them. Okay. But can there be? Could I draw a line between A and B? And the answer is, well, yeah, you can. And so points A and B are collinear. In fact, any 2 points in space are collinear. Okay. But if I add a third point here, point C kind of off to the side here, then I would say that points A, B, and C are non-collinear. Not just that there isn't one, but I can't draw one. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now, a very similar term that we'll talk about right now, and you can go ahead and write this into your module book, and that is the word coplanar. Okay. So coplanar is when you have 4 or more points are coplanar if there can be a plane containing all of the points. Otherwise, the points are non-coplanar. Okay, so for coplanar lines, any 3 points will always be coplanar in space. Okay, you can draw a plane that contains those 3 points, but when you have 4 or more, they may or may not be on the same plane, okay, or can be drawn on the same plane. Okay, next is the length of a segment. Okay, the length of segment AB is the distance from A to B and is denoted as lowercase ab. Now notice that AB right here, this is a segment because it has a segment on top. This has nothing on top. Okay, this is a distance or a length. Okay, please do not get those mixed up. I know it's a very common thing to get confused, but if there's a segment on top, it's a segment. If nothing's on top, it's a length. The next thing I want to talk about is a ray. Okay, what is meant by a ray? Now, a ray is also part of a line. Okay, just like a segment is. But a ray starts somewhere, okay, and then goes on forever in only one direction. Okay, so this is ray AB. Okay, this is noted as AB with a line and going that way. Okay, now some things to talk about with how this is notated. Okay, the arrow is always to the right. Okay, if you have an arrow pointing to the left, it's not notated correctly. Okay, the left letter is always the starting point. Okay, and the left letter is any point on the ray. Okay, so if I had another point here, like point C, I could also call this a C, where I'm starting at A and going in the direction of C. Okay, you could not write these as CA. That's not the same as this group. That's this ray here in green. You could not call it AC going this way either. Okay, arrow's going in the wrong direction. Okay, so a ray with vertex. So both of these are correct. A ray with vertex A that contains the point B. Okay, let me give you a definition of ray. Okay, so a ray is part of a line that goes on forever in one direction. Okay, for our next vocabulary word, we're jumping all the way to lesson 3. Okay, so these have a lot of construction problems in them. We are actually going to focus just on the vocabulary in these first few lessons and come back to constructions later. Okay, so angle. An angle is the union, meaning the combination of two rays with the same endpoint. Okay, so here we have ray GF. Okay, starts at G, goes in the direction of F forever. Okay, and we have GH, ray GH, starting at G, going in the direction of H. The combination of those two rays creates an angle, where those rays go on forever, but it kind of creates an angle. Okay, now the way you name an angle is you have a little angle mark. Okay, and then you have the letters in order. Okay, and you can have angle FGH, or you can call this angle HGF. Okay, what's important is the vertex is this middle letter. Okay, so it kind of goes in order. If you walk from F to G and then G to H, you're kind of creating that angle. Or conversely, from H to G and then G to F, you're kind of creating the angle. But that middle letter has to be the vertex. Okay, the other way to name an angle is actually by using a number. If there's a number here, sometimes we have some pretty confusing diagrams. We wouldn't do it in this case right here, but if the diagram gets kind of confusing, instead of using letters or if to refer back to an angle a lot of times, we may give it a number like 1, 2, 3, and to make sure it's not like an L, let's just call this angle 2. So I could call this angle 2 if in my diagram it's drawn as 2, or if I just write the number 2 to talk about that exact angle. On the next page is the definition of angle measure. It's kind of buried in this big paragraph, which you can read. This right here is the angle measure. Okay, the angle measure is to every angle AOB, there corresponds a quantity, which is the measure. Here's how you write the measure. Actually, it's written here, huh? Called the degree or measure of the angle, so that 0 is less than the measure of angle AOB is less than 180. So we're kind of defining measure as being less than 180, but as we'll talk about later, the angles actually can go more than 180. Okay, but there always corresponds some quantity, and that has to do with the fact that we've defined arbitrarily that a circle is 360 degrees. Okay, and we'll talk a bit about why that was, and some kind of other things that have to do with what if that was a different number. Anyway, but we've kind of picked to be 360, and so the angle is kind of what part of that 360 it is. Okay, the last word that I want to teach you today, which I know it's a lot already, but there's one more word that I want you to be exposed to even this early. And I'm going to pick just some point down here as a just place to put it, okay? And that is the word congruent. Okay? Congruent, so two figures are congruent if they have the same size and shape. So two segments can be congruent if they have the exact same length. Two angles are congruent if they have the exact same angle measure. Okay? Two triangles are congruent if all of their lengths and angles are all the exact same. Okay? That's a really good word to use, congruent, and the symbol that we use is congruent. Okay, we'll talk about where that symbol comes from a little bit later on in the year. Okay, this was the first video about some of the building blocks of geometry. We talked about line segments and angles. We talked about notations and definitions of point, line, plane, segment, what it means to be collinear, coplanar wasn't on this list, but it should have been. Segment length, ray, angle, angle measure, congruent, all kinds of good stuff that we will use throughout the entire rest of the year. Thank you so much for watching.